Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make a steamed apple sponge pudding. So this is going to be a steamed pudding. So there are some apples in the bottom of the bowl and a batter goes on the top. We cover it and steam it for 2.5 hours, though you could do it in a pressure cooker if you wanted to, and that would take much less time, but I'm quite happy doing mine on the stove top. And then we simply turn it out and the apples are on the top. In a nice caramel because we're going to use some golden syrup. There's some cinnamon and ginger in the sponge batter as well, just to give some flavour to that, and there's also apple puree in the sponge batter, keeping it nice and moist. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and for this I have 275 grams, which is just about slightly less than 10 ounces of apples which I have chopped into pieces. I have 25 grams, 2 tablespoons of light brown sugar. I have 175 grams, 3/4 of a cup plus 2 tablespoons of caster sugar, 175 grams, 12.5 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter, 175 grams, which is 1 cup and a scant 3 tablespoons of self-raising flour. That's based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup. If you don't have self-raising flour, you can use plain flour, the same amount, and use 1.5 to 2 teaspoons of baking powder and mix that in, and that would be roughly the same. I have 10 milliliters, 2 teaspoons of vanilla bean paste, but you could use vanilla extract, 1.5 grams, half a teaspoon of ground ginger, 3 grams, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 50 milliliters, 2.5 tablespoons of golden syrup, 3 large eggs, which would be extra large in the USA. And I have 45 milliliters, 3 tablespoons of milk, though I may not need all of that. I also have 2 apples, which I will peel and core and cut into wedges later on. We don't need that done just yet. So that's all the ingredients, and the first thing we need to do is to make our apple puree. And to make the apple puree, I've put 45 milliliters, which is 3 tablespoons of water, into a pan, and I'm going to add in the light brown sugar. And I'll just give that a little stir around. And then I'm going to put my chopped apples in as well. And I ought to say that I did have the apples in a little bit of lemon juice to stop them from browning while I was getting everything ready. And I'm going to turn on the heat. And I'm going to cook those, stirring from time to time until they've sort of completely mashed down into a puree. So my apples are boiling now, and as I said, I'm just going to stir those occasionally, and I'm going to cook those down until they are a puree, and you can mash them a little bit if you want to. And so I've stirred mine and cooked it down. I added just a little drop more water as well, so it's quite nicely into a puree. There may be a couple of little pieces left, but that's fine. So I'm going to put that into a bowl and I'm going to leave it to cool down, and once it's cooled down I'll come back and we'll go on to make the batter for our steamed sponge pudding. So my pureed apple has now cooled down somewhat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my golden syrup and I'm going to put that into this pudding basin. Now this is a 1.2 litre pudding basin, about 2 pints. Mine has a lid, but I will show you what to do if you don't have a lid for your basin, because you may have a ceramic or a glass basin, but I'm going to put my golden syrup into the bottom of the basin. Like that, and then I'm going to cover that with apple. So I have peeled my apples and cut them into wedges. I'm just going to put those in. And you can put as much in as you want. I'm not going to put all of the 2 in. I think that's enough as it is like that, basically. That's going to give a nice amount of apple. So then I'll just set that to one side while we make the batter. And to make the batter, I'm going to put my sugar into a large bowl, and I'm going to add the butter and cream that into the sugar. So I'll whisk that together until the whole thing is light and fluffy. And that's good enough. So then I'm going to add my eggs in one at a time. And one of my eggs broke, but it doesn't matter. So I'll add them one at a time and I'll mix them. And what I'll do is I'll just drop in a little bit of my flour as well. That will hopefully keep everything from splitting. And with the eggs mixed in, I'm going to add in my vanilla bean paste as well at this stage and mix that through. So I'll just set that to one side for a moment. Then I'll take my self-raising flour and I'm going to put the cinnamon and the ginger into that. And I'm just going to stir that through a little bit to get those spices mixed in. That's good enough. So I'll then pour that into the butter mixture and I'm just going to fold that until it's all combined. and that's quite well combined. So I'll add in my apple puree as well. And fold it through. And then I'm going to add in a little drop of my milk. I want to add just enough milk so that the mixture plops off the spoon in sort of dollops, basically. So I start with a tablespoon, or about a tablespoon. That will loosen up a little bit. And that's almost there, so I'm just going to add a little drop more, maybe half a tablespoon. So I think that's good enough like that. So I need to put that mixture into the pudding basin. I'm going to level that off a little bit. And I think that's a little bit full, but it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to cover mine with my lid, like that. But if you don't have a lid, then what you need to do is take a piece of parchment paper, which you have pleated a little bit, and put that over the top. And then put a piece of aluminium foil over the top of that as well, like that. And then you need to tie that with some string all the way round, and that will be ready to go into the pan. So I have here a saucepan which I've put a plate in the bottom of, turned upside down, and I'm going to stand my pudding basin in there like that, and then I'm going to cover that, I'm going to pour in some just boiled water into the saucepan so that it comes about halfway up the side of the basin. And that's good enough. So I'm going to cover that with the lid, and I'm going to put that onto the stove and bring it up to a boil, and then gently simmer it for 2.5 hours. And that will steam the pudding and it will cook nicely. After 2.5 hours I'll test it with a skewer, and if the skewer comes out clean, that means it's done. If it doesn't come out clean, I'll steam it for a further 20 minutes and try it again. And then once it's completely cooked, I'll take it out of the pan and I'll leave it for a few minutes, and then I will turn it out onto a plate and I'll come back and show you the results. So I steamed my steamed apple sponge pudding for 2 hours and a quarter actually, and I thought mine was done. So I took the lid off and I tested it and it was done. So I took it out of the saucepan and I put it onto a plate. Now I should say that I've used a recipe from Olive Magazine, and that recipe is slightly wrong, I think, because it does, as I said, say to use a 1.2 litre pudding basin. I think a 1.5 litre pudding basin would be a much better fit, because my batter was almost right up to the top, and so it doesn't have very much room for growth, basically. However, mine baked perfectly fine, but I think a larger basin would actually work much better. So I just put that out there for you. Particularly if I'd have put all my apple in that they suggested, I wouldn't have had enough room for all the batter. Anyway, it has baked, it has steamed quite nicely, and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is it, and there's some golden syrup just run down the side, and I've also just made some custard to go with it. So I'm going to cut a piece of it if I can, try not to make too much mess of it. Then I'll see if I can pick that up and put that into a bowl. And that looks quite nice. It's very moist, I have to say. But I think it looks quite good. So I'll put some custard on the one that I've just portioned out, and I'll have a taste of it. Oh, that does taste nice, I have to say. I'll have a taste of the sponge by itself if I can. Yes, it tastes very, very good. I can taste the cinnamon and the ginger, as well as the sweetness from the apple. And as I say, it's quite moist, but it is cooked all the way through. So that's very, very nice indeed. As I mentioned, it's better to use a larger bowl than 1.2 litres. Or 2 pints, maybe 2.5 pints would be good. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there'll be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.